Welcome. We are gathered again on Wednesday, March 15th, 2023, for the Women's Canadian Club of Hamilton's meeting. Welcome. I am Louise Noel Ambrose, President of the Women's Canadian Club of Hamilton. We recognize and acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampong Agreement. Might we not only learn about the Indigenous people of Canada, but from them? The WCCH is striving to continue to be a group of people concerned about issues that affect women, educating and advocating for those issues in our community. Our purpose is to foster throughout the greater Hamilton area an interest in all matters of public concern to strengthen Canadian unity and identity, encourage the education and promotion of Canadian heritage and history, foster an appreciation and awareness of Canadian culture and traditions to new Canadians. We thank you for joining us today. On March 8th, we celebrated International Women's Day. May we continue to be phenomenal women because it is Women's Day every day. We are elated to have Uzma Qureshi, Community Engagement Advisor to the Mayor of Hamilton, joining us as our guest speaker. Uzma will be speaking on what does it mean to truly embrace equity. So today we shall listen, participate, and learn about how we can challenge stereotypes, call out discrimination, and draw attention to biases within our communities. Uzma captures the essence of community by encouraging individual empowerment, which results in a diverse range of voices invested in the common good. Uzma's work encompasses the full spectrum of local engagement and community collaboration. We are very pleased to have you today. Uzma?
Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to meet all these wonderful women. Thank you to all you women for coming out today and to just sit and listen and learn. You know, one thing that I've learned, and I'm sure that all of you are in the same position, is that learning aspect is lifelong. And a lot of times learning means to unlearn some of the things that we have learned along the way. So today I chose this topic based on the theme for International Women's Day. And while I begin, I want to take a moment and also recognize our MPP for Hamilton Mountain, Monique Taylor, who's here today as well. Thank you very much, MVP Taylor, for being here. You are such a great supporter of women's issues, of folks that are experiencing challenges with mental health and addictions and all of the vulnerable and marginalized sectors. So thank you very much for that. There was something that I learned at an event that I was at this last weekend, and it really stuck with me. And it was when we thank our dignitaries for coming, to remember that dignitaries are people that are very important to us. And one thing that I realized was that everyone that attends events are dignitaries. So all of you women today are our dignitaries. So thank you again for coming and being really purposeful in learning and unlearning in order to ensure a more equitable society for us today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if you'll just give me a moment here. All right. Okay. And everyone can see the screen okay? Yes, fantastic. Louise, I'm not going to have view of the participants, so if there's any questions, if you see any hands raising, can I please ask that you notify me of that? Amazing, thank you very much. Okay, so like I was mentioning, equity, embracing equity was the theme that was chosen this year for International Women's Day. And I think before we even go into talking about embracing equity, we have to really think about what is the aim of this theme. We know that equity is critical to achieve, but before we can actually look at the tangible steps that we can take as individuals, as organizations, and as individuals, we have to look at some really important questions. What does equity mean? Why is it important? Are equal opportunities enough? What can we do it as individuals to achieve it? Right? So as a society, we find that we continuously are speaking about the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Some of us, many people that serve in nonprofits or in funded organizations, public organizations, this is something that we talk about a lot. And many times it might look like we've achieved a great deal, or that we're very close to being an equitable society. But I think that what's really important, and why this year IWD was, the theme was chosen for Embrace Equity, is that we need to get the world talking about it. It's not just something that we need to do as a city or a province or a country. This needs to be a global conversation about how to achieve an equitable society. So here's a picture of two students. And on one side, you can see the goal here is to have access to the books that they need to learn or grow. And we see the question, what does equality mean and what does equity mean? The reason why I think this was really important to bring up is that many times when we speak of equity, we equate it with equality, and both of them are very distinct. So as you can see, on the left, we have equality. The goal is for children to be able to get a good education. They're both provided with books. They're both provided with pencils. And they're both provided with 2 stools to stand on, because we know that they need a little bit of support to reach those books. But as you can see very well, that the equality aspect doesn't work, because both of them are coming from very different places. And so equity will dictate that each person gets the tools that they need in order to achieve that end goal. So equality is providing the same to everybody. Equity really refers to fairness and justice. We don't start from the same place, as you can see here, and we must acknowledge and make adjustments to these imbalances. And that is the true meaning of equity. Equality, yes, is important, but equality means nothing without that lens of equity. But the next question becomes, okay, why is equity important? Equity ensures that everyone has access to the same treatment, opportunities, and advancement. The ultimate goal is that everyone everywhere is able to achieve the goals that they set out for themselves without any barriers and with access to the tools that they need to achieve these goals. We know enough research has been done to show the impact of an equitable society or equitable practices in the workplace, in community groups, in religious organizations. We know that strong equity initiatives really does result in folks feeling much more part of a movement or job satisfaction. They have higher levels of trust with the organization that they're working for, and they are far more engaged. So the importance of equity really is to ensure that everyone has the power to shape their own lives and contribute to the development of society. So I wanted to go in a little bit about what happens when equity becomes a priority. We know that benefits are experienced everywhere. So if we look at volunteerism and employees, the evidence is clear. 158% more likely to understand their audience when they have at least one member of the team who represents that audience's gender, race, age, sexual orientation, or culture. So this is very clearly showing that there is an impact, a direct impact of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So the same thing when an equity lens is applied to management. The diversity of gender, country of origin, career path, and industry background are highly correlated to innovation. And we see this every day. If we start looking at hiring practices for larger organizations, they are equating that whole out-of-the-box thinking with looking at international and global experience. Because what better way of thinking outside of the box than finding somebody who is coming from a very different place? Organizations have seen much success in attracting global talent because they know that it will be better for the culture at the company, but also the productivity and the outcomes of that company. And of course, leadership. Leadership can be equated with organizations that are for-profit or nonprofit, or even religious or community-based organizations. Organizations in the top 25% when it comes to gender diversity among executive leadership teams are 21% more likely to be profitable and 27% better at creating value. And that is huge. So simply put, equity helps every employee and volunteer to participate and contribute without fear of being their true selves. We know that it fosters higher degrees of productivity and innovation, as was mentioned. But what it really does is it contributes to increased engagement. I know we're talking about revenue here sometimes, but that engagement aspect is very, very critical in any aspect of the work that we do, women. Remember, a lot of the times, the goal, although it might be increase in fundraising for an organization or an increase in revenue for an organization, that engagement piece, if it's not there, nothing else matters in the organization. So we know that when equity lenses are applied to engaging folks, that level of engagement does increase. So we've talked a lot about the importance of why it should be and what has been going on, but let's talk about how far we've come now. How far have we come to achieving gender equity? So we know that today, 50% of the workforce is women. So half of women are right now in the workforce. Excuse me. We also know that women are achieving higher paying jobs than ever before, which is amazing to hear. What we're finding, though, is that while there's been progress, the pay gap still remains. Across all sectors, women still make an average of 89 cents for every dollar that a man makes. So this is an area that we really do need to push on across all sectors. Even though more women have entered higher paying sectors, 2/3 of senior leadership positions are still held by men. Imagine if 50% of the workforce is women, how is it still that 2/3 of senior leadership positions are still held by men? Something that we need to work on, definitely. Women are also overrepresented in caring sectors like childcare, long-term care, nursing, hospitality. And of course, we all know that as a result of this, women were disproportionately impacted by COVID closures, layoffs, illnesses, and continue to be impacted today. Women, in addition to working full-time or being out in the workforce, they remain primarily responsible for maintaining the family and raising our next generation of leaders and caring for adults. So as you can see, there is absolutely no doubt there's a lot more work that we all need to do to achieve equity in our society. So many times we think about equity being something that someone else needs to worry about. the government of the day needs to worry about, or an organization that's working on gender equity needs to worry about, or an organization working on equity, diversity, and inclusion needs to be working about. But what we're going to talk about today a little bit is going into what we can do as individuals to achieve equity in society. The very first thing, and I cannot say this enough, is the acknowledgement. We must. The only way to improve equity means that we acknowledge the inequities that people face, and then we actively work to address that imbalance. This does require a really deep degree of introspection and really looking at our personal values. We remember at the beginning of the presentation, I thanked everyone for coming because it is about learning and also about the unlearning. All of us, regardless of where we've come from, what our backgrounds are, how we grew up, we've learned things and picked things up along the way, many times without realizing that it really means that we need to unlearn them because they're leading to the inequity in society. Speaking up, if you know someone is making it, if you know someone that's making that insensitive comment or a joke, calling attention to that comment, talking about why it's unacceptable is really important. Knowing that we won't be able to change things overnight, but the more that we engage in this type of conversation, and remember, it's not a debate, it's a conversation, that's when the change to behavior will happen. And we are seeing a lot of that change taking place. We just need to do it more and continue with it. So an example here is given if there's somebody has made a joke. You can say that joke wasn't very funny, it doesn't show respect, and it's hurtful to people who were born with a different skin color than you. And I'd appreciate if you don't say things like that. That will likely spur a conversation, but that's good. That's really good because people want to know more. And sometimes it's just become the norm and that's why they're continuing with that line of conversation. But if we put a stop to it and say, hey, wait a second, think about what you're saying, think about how it impacts others, there will be change in the future. And that's something that I'm very confident in. Make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak. So all of us here today, the group is part of the Women's Club of Canada, the Hamilton chapter. And making sure that those of us that may not be speaking, and I've seen this already this afternoon when we were gathering, we had folks that were pointing out people that weren't speaking and asking, how's everyone okay? It's really important to do that because we want to make sure that those that are the quiet voices are heard as well. But also take a look around the table. Is everyone that's represented at the table? The community that you're trying to serve, whether it's a Hamilton community or a specific ethnic community, are those folks there at the table? And if they're not, take a look at how do we get those folks there? Because everyone's voices are very important, especially when you're representing an entire community. Being purposeful and deliberate in equity and inclusion makes space for growth that benefits absolutely everyone, not just some. Listen to learn. Many times we're very quick to say, we hear an opinion and we'll say, well, but take a moment to let that person finish and think about it, digest it first before you think about how you want to respond. Especially when you receive criticism, when we receive criticism, think about what's being said to us. Is there something in there that we were missing? Is there something that we can use to improve ourselves? That introspection in our everyday lives is such a meaningful mechanism for growth. And that's what, again, is going to help us achieve an equitable society. And prioritizing equity. This I cannot say enough. When looking at your organization, community group, or even your circle of friends, prioritize diverse and inclusive hiring committees or practices. Many times we'll hear an organization say, oh, well, if we say we want someone that speaks a certain language, then we're not going to be able to get the qualifications that we're looking for. That is simply untrue. When we prioritize equity, when we prioritize diversity, we will achieve those aspects without having to sacrifice experience or qualifications. This is something that we've seen time and time again, and it's an excuse that gets used quite a bit. But as a person who has gone through these processes, who's helped organizations set up inclusive hiring practices, that have helped community groups set up inclusive recruitment practices, when we prioritize diversity, we become much closer to equity than if we think about just that qualification aspect. We will not be sacrificing qualifications or experience. We will be prioritizing diversity. So as you can see, as individuals, each of us plays a really important, a very critical role. And like I said before, it's not just about an organization or a certain level of government. It is our collective responsibility to use the knowledge we gain, to share it with others, and to ensure that we are taking tangible steps to progressing towards an equitable society. And I'm going to leave you with one quote that is critical when we're applying that lens of equity. And that is, if you come here to help me, and I'm sure you've heard this many times, but if you come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And what that really is speaking about is when we're in the space of promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion, when we're in the space of learning, and when we're in the space of making sure other people have voices and are represented at the table, it's not a matter of we're helping, right? There is nobody that has more power over the other. It really is about working together, serving together, because our freedoms are really bound together. It's not about one has and the other. It's about our liberation being bound up together. And that's how we will go ahead and be able to move forward with EDI, and especially the equity aspect here in our society. And thank you very much. And I'll stop sharing now. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take those. Or any comments, that would be fantastic as well.
You can now open your phone, your mic, and ask questions.
I'm glad that you explained the difference between equality and equity. I've heard so much in the media, you know, about those two E words, and people often get them mixed up and aren't quite sure of the meaning. So thanks for the explanation.
You're welcome, my pleasure. I think you're right. There's people do put both of those words together and take them to mean the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And understandably so, right? But there is a much more deeper distinction between the two.
Susan?
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that, at least for me, those two words, until maybe many other things have come to light as to our day and time now, that they weren't as important to separate. Mm-hmm. And whereas I've always thought that they were the same thing, really, until, you know, just lately. But I can see how our times have sort of forced people to, or not forced, but got them thinking about what exactly is the difference. So I think there are a lot of people that don't know the difference between the two words, and I'm glad to know that you went into that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good thing. Yeah.
Kiri, Are you going to sing for us to start your launch?
Oh, I'm not gonna sing. Only if you go first, then I'll go.
Oh, I'm in. I'm in.
Uzma, so I was wondering, so you're the community engagement advisor for Andrea Horath. I was wondering how you implemented EDI into your job every day. Like, how does that look day to day? Because sort of broadly speaking about diversity, equity, and inclusion can be very ambiguous.
Yeah.
And I feel like ambiguity can lead to kind of nothing being done in a like actionable way. So I was wondering how you implemented that into your everyday planning or in your job in general.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. That's really important. You know, you're right. We talk about EDI a lot. How is it being implemented? So I've been in this office for a little bit over a month now. And there is a lot of work that needs to be done around the city level. I can say that my presence here in the mayor's office shows that there is more openness and understanding around the importance of. So one thing that I did, one of the first things I did was develop a calendar of days of significance for the various communities that are represented here in Hamilton. Reaching out to those communities is something that I'm still doing because we understand that the communication channels that exist need to be looked at in a way that specific communities and all communities are able to receive that information and be able to provide feedback and be part of that larger conversation. So that's a very big part of what I'm working on right now. It is a very big task because of the sheer number of communities that here exist in Hamilton, but I am looking forward to that and I enjoy that so much every day because I recognize that's something that was really missing. 2 weeks ago at City Hall here on Saturday, we had the Pashtun Council of Canada celebrate International Mother Language Day. Never been done before at City Hall. And we want to see a lot more of community groups and the various communities that exist utilizing these public spaces, because that's a great way to raise awareness to everyone else in Hamilton about the fantasticness that exists within our community. And there is so much happening. There's so much good that's happening right now. The mayor also is looking at specific task forces for different communities. I'm sure you all saw with Black History Month, this was the first year it was celebrated in such a big way. There was bus advertisements for Black History Month for 13 weeks throughout the city. We had a great event here at City Hall. But I think the one really important aspect that we need to continue to look at is that the door of the mayor's office is always going to be open. And that feedback, that criticism is really important to hear. It's great to hear the good things that are going on, but it's important to hear what we need to do more of, because only with feedback from community will we know what we're falling behind on and also ideas on how to move forward. So I am relying on my experience, but also everybody else in the city to be able to achieve this goal of engagement of all communities and not just people that know about what's going on, right? Really reaching out to every corner of Hamilton and seeing what we can do more and be better at to welcome that feedback, but engage more folks in that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, totally. And then can I ask another question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I was wondering how you felt like people who are not in a racialized community or are not a minority group, how can that group recognize and learn from lived experiences of marginalized community, like people in their own community?
So when we speak about diversity, we're not just talking about ethnic groups, right? And it's talking about other groups as well. Can you give me an example of a group that you might be thinking about today?
Yeah, well, so me, myself, I am gay, but I am not a Black person who's lived through traumatic, triggering, high emotional events. And specifically at work, I've been doing, so I'm actually a HR student and I really hope to get into EDI as my specialty. So it's really cool to be talking to you right now. But more specifically, how can I, as a white person, like a non-visual minority, support my coworkers who are very visual minorities, who are kind of othered by certain groups, and how can I kind of learn from their lived experiences? Like, how can I amplify and advocate for my coworkers and I guess in my community in general?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. There are advisory committees that you can join for the City of Hamilton as well. They're very critically important, and they are actually in the process of accepting applications right now. So that might be something to look at. But when it comes to, there's one thing that I'm going to caution you on a little bit. When you're talking about coworkers who, might not be comfortable, I think first of all, that listening aspect that it sounds like you're doing a lot of already, but encouraging them to speak up. And if they are uncomfortable with it, asking if you can speak up in their place, right? Because the one thing that we have to be really cognizant of in this work, and you're going into EDI, so it's really important to remember is, we don't want to be in a position where we're speaking for another group, right? Regardless of what that group is. So that encouragement first listening, and that encouragement factor to say, hey, I'll stand behind you, I'll stand beside you. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's pen a letter together. Let me, whatever the case is, that's really helpful. You will still run into times when they don't want to talk about it and they don't want to move forward with it. And that's something that we have to just learn to take a step back and respect that aspect, because they might not be in a place that they're comfortable to be vocal yet. But the fact that they're coming to you and sharing that with you means that, your listening is having an impact. And that's huge, Kiri. That is like so huge, to be able to say that, oh my God, this person who doesn't identify with my background or my sexual orientation, whatever the case is, that they're listening to me is a good support. And hopefully they will get to a place where they are comfortable to speak about it, or they're comfortable to say to you, can you bring that up? Do you have any other questions, Kiri?
Oh, I really should, but I don't want to monopolize your time.
Okay.
I definitely feel like there are many people who would have some great discussion with you.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you answering that in that kind of total way, like a very full circle way.
Kiri, what I will say is that I'll put my email address in the chat if you ever want to chat. I'm open for that as well.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you, Uzma.
I have a question.
Yes, Marilyn.
In regards to, you said that the city has some goals and open goals, and I'm just wondering, are we as Hamiltonians collaborating or bonding with other cities to look at their statistics, and they gain help and recognize or compare statistics with other communities? I think that's important.
Absolutely. Yes, that does take place. The city has various departments that looks at what are we doing as a city. They're looking at other municipalities to see what are some of the best practices there. So the city of Hamilton actually has their own community engagement team as well. And that team appears to be growing, which means that there's more of a focus on engagement. And I think that's a really good place to be in. Does that mean we're doing enough? I don't know that the answer is yes, right? And I don't know that it'll ever be yes yet. But I do know that we are taking steps forward, and it's an important area of focus for many of the councillors. It's important certainly for the mayor, and we're going to keep on working on this. It's not something that we're going to say this is going to be here for a term and we're going to pass it on and see how it goes. No, this is a really important part about building a community development, engagement, that whole aspect of transparency and accountability. It's critical that those conversations remain. It's critical that we're assessing our performance based on our performance and based on how we compare to other municipalities, many times how we compare to other countries as well. So yes, thank you for that question though.
Hi, my name is Arika Akimbobala. I moved to Hamilton last year. My question is, does the city have some sort of maybe affinity groups, or like, is there a way that groups can, be represented, and or have maybe groups can put a representative forward and just get somebody to kind of communicate to the larger groups. I'm Nigerian, and most of my Nigerian friends and family here in Hamilton, and we're a large number. We're so many here. We always go to Brampton for events because the city always extends like invitations to us because we're like friends of the city.
Yes.
So we have a lot of Nigerians, like the Black History events, all of the events they had at the city of Brampton, most of us went. And then we have like WhatsApp groups of Nigerians here in Hamilton where we're almost 200. And most of the information that gets passed on are of things that, the mayor of Brampton is doing or the city of Brampton is doing. So most of us Nigerians engage more with the city of Brampton. We have, we have like a relationship with that city. How can we benefit from, events or things that are happening here in Hamilton so that we can sort of engage directly with our own city? Because I feel like we don't have a connection.
Yeah, that's true. So one thing I will say, if there is an event that you'd like to host, that you'd like the mayor to be at, or you just want to host it at City Hall, I just put my email into the chat, let me know. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to, if you want to send me a direct message with your name, the organization you're with, your phone number, and email. Anytime that there's an event happening, I can certainly add you to our email list and do this. So this is something new that we're doing because we do recognize that there is a little bit of a gap in service, and that is the sharing of information to different groups. So the city has their own, but what I'd like to do is really develop a list of community organizations that, regardless of the event that's happening, as long as it's with a community group, we can send a message out and say, just letting you know this is what's taking place on this day and this day. It's a really important idea, a really important aspect that is missing. So thank you so much for bringing it up, but certainly do send me your information and I'll add you to my list for sure. And we'll get that information out for you.
I'll do that right away.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. I mean, I'm making such great connections and, these are really important conversations. So, before I came to the mayor's office, I was working at the Immigrants Working Center. I was the assistant ED there. And that was a big part of our job, was making sure that groups were represented. And you're right, the Nigerian community in Hamilton is huge, right? So there is opportunity for collaboration. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Any more questions?
Wow, that was pretty good.
Maybe Kiri wants to ask a last question. She wishes. It's a burning question that she needs to be answered. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Louise. So something that I've recently looked at, there was a really great study that was done by Dr. Ruth Rodney about women and or racialized women who work in gender-based violence and emergency services in Hamilton.
Okay.
Actually, Uzma, I can send you that report if you want.
That's great, yeah.
Yes.
But something that I can echo is that it was really important that acknowledgement was made. So that's really important for all organizations going forward. Sort of past histories and how certain structures and systems in organizations really reflect a colonial, misogynist, like oppressive kind of background. But something that like through this research was found that and kind of applies to the majority of this group. From what I can tell, a lot of people here are white or something similar. So, well, what this research showed was that it's important for people to not only put the burden on their minority groups in the workplace, the burden is also placed on white folks, and that comes in the form of addressing white supremacy and white privilege. And I feel like during a lot of EDI practices, it focuses a lot on the future rather than focusing on how white privilege and white supremacy has put people in the places they are today. And I feel like I've gone through so much training. I work for the YWCA, and I have gone through so much training, but none of it focused on white supremacy and touching on white privilege in the way that I feel like would be so beneficial for many people in Hamilton and in this group as well. So I was wondering what you thought about that. Like this is something I read probably 2 days ago, and it's still rattling around in my head. So I was wondering what you thought about that.
I have lots of thoughts about that. I don't think we have enough time for that, but definitely, knowing that you work at the YW, sharing that with Medora would be really beneficial, right? Because she's one that really does champion those uncomfortable conversations that need to take place, right? Yeah, that's a really big topic, and like I said, I think there's a lot to be done there. There's a lot to be done, right? And a lot of it does go back to white supremacy. And we went through an era where we saw yellow vesters on the doorsteps of City Hall, and what does that look like? Where we saw the Freedom March in Ottawa, what does that look like? So there's a lot of conversations that need to be had. A lot of them are going to be very uncomfortable ones, but as we all know, those uncomfortable conversations are necessary and important and do lead to equity, right? Because that's the end goal. So in order for us to achieve the future, like you're saying, Curie, we do not need to take a look at the past, how it's affecting our present, in order for us to move forward into the future. Yeah, Curie, I do look forward to connecting with you for sure.
Yeah, this report was unreal. I just wanted to mention that one of the things in this report that was unreal that I would not have landed on if I hadn't read research like this from informed bodies that have lived experience is how, especially women who are racialized working in this sector, how they experience so much more in the workday and in general, like racialized women and women who are marginalized experience so much more in their workday than their white cis het coworkers, especially their male coworkers. So one of the things that was proposed in this research document is that people who are in marginalized communities have a protected, compensated time in their day to be able to kind of take a breath and just sort of proposed extra break times during the day so that people who are experiencing a higher workload because of how they were born have the chance to just kind of take a breath. And I thought that was so amazing. I thought that was such a great idea. And obviously just a starting place on how to recognize how people in the BIPOC community, people in the gay community experience work in such a different way than a lot of their coworkers, perhaps.
Mhm.
That's just something I wanted to share. It's not even really a question.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Curie.
We thank you for being here today.
Curie, somebody's asked in the chat if you could please say the name of the report. Perhaps you can populate that into the chat, please. Thank you.
And please, Curie, the email that we corresponded with you, please forward the report there and I'll share it with our membership. And a subject that it's okay, we will post the links on our social media platform. Any more questions? My apologies. My laptop had crashed, so I'm not using my cell phone.
No.
So we want to, Uzma, today a lot was uncompacted here with us. It's a great thing it's been recorded because we will go back to it and revisit it. But we sincerely thank you for being here today. And we wish you all the best and success in this endeavor with your new position. We are here to support you, and we look forward to future collaborations with the Women's Canadian Club of Hamilton. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Just letting you know, next month's guest speaker, which is scheduled for April the 19th at 1 via Zoom, is Miss Renee Rampasad from the Old Ganja Cannabis Society. As you know, April 20, we celebrate 420, so she'll be here speaking with us. And following that, in May 17, we have a guest speaker from the St. Joe's Hospital Foundation speaking to us on mental health issues. Please note, all this information can be viewed on our website, so do visit and check out what we've been doing, the amazing job, content that's there. Give kudos to Lee for maintaining the updates. And also, the Women's Spirit, the Women of Spirit Award is October 18th. Nomination opens at the end of the month. Information is now on our website. Nominate someone. We know of her. Nominate someone, please and thank you. Visit our social media platforms. We're on IG, we're on Twitter, and we're on Facebook. We love loves and sharing. Thank you. It is now 1:54 p.m. The meeting presentation gathering is adjourned. Thank you so much.